So just very quickly, I'm with FutureLab. I'm a Dutchman living in Belgium. FutureLab has been around for 18 years now, and we work with a lot of nice names over the years. Right now, I'm working with Audi, for instance, to help them increase their customer experience, to improve their customer experience. And don't worry, I'm not going to run through all of that, but if you afterwards want to look at what are all the different topics that come into customer experience and customer centricity, here's a little overview. But effectively, what you need to do is you start with what is the experience I want to deliver? No, what's my strategy? How do I want to do that? Then, okay, what tools do I need to be able to do that? Operationalizing it. Engage. You need to bring the people in your company on board. And yes, we're talking about SMEs. Now, SME is pretty wide. There's one-person SMEs. There's what the Germans still call Mittelstand, which can go up to 5 billion turnover. So it depends a little bit on how big you are. And at the end, all of this is to make sure that you actually get more loyal customers and make more money. That's what this is all about. Now, a couple of years ago, I was in Cuba. And as you do, you pick your favorite beach bar at some point, so every day you wash up there. And at some point, the third day, when I arrived, the barman already put my favorite drink in front of me, because he knew by now. And he asked me, so what do you do? I said, well, I'm a customer centricity consultant. Ooh, big words. What does it mean? I said, well, I help companies understand the needs and desires of the customers and how to answer them. And he said, oh, that's the same thing I do. That's a nice little reminder, and particularly for SMEs, of course, that's where you come from. It's, you start as a small company, you start as someone with a vision, or maybe 2 or 3 people with a vision, direct contact with the customers, and really focusing on, here's my first customer, or like the baker in town, they know what you need. The challenge is, how do I keep that up? How do I keep this customer focus once we start growing? And one thing I always want to bring in here, that we often get a little bit of pushback, we're in B2B. All this nonsense about customer centricity, it's irrelevant. We have the best product, and that will sell. I do a lot of business in Germany, and that's the #1 argument I always get. The truth is that B2B is even more important from a customer centricity point of view, because at the end of the day, B2B buyers decide what they're going to buy based on whether there's a personal value in there for them. And that doesn't mean an envelope under the table. I know we're in Belgium, we have a little bit of a history here. It is about, does this help me in my job? Does it help me look better for my colleagues? Does it help my future career? Or the other way around, do I not have to be afraid if I buy your product? So that's, at the end of the day, really what all of this is about, understanding what drives the emotions of people and how we can answer those. And just as a typical example, there's 2 B2B companies that have always understood this extremely well. IBM, and some of you may have heard the statement before, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. That was a marketing slogan they introduced in the 60s when they were doing really badly. There were a lot of new computer companies that were delivering 2 times, 4 times faster machines for half the money, and IBM said, it'll take us 10 years to catch up with that. Let's play on the emotion. And Thomas Watson Jr., the CEO of IBM at the time, introduced this statement, nobody ever got fired for IBM. And they boosted their sales with that. Because that's, at the end of the day, and it's no different today, if I offer something to a big company, I have to show that I'm going to help them. I'm not going to hurt them. At McKinsey, I, as a consultant, often come up against McKinsey. They're an insurance company, nothing else. They give people the insurance, look, whatever happens, we have said that you should do this. It wasn't your idea. You can blame us if it goes wrong. So when we want to start talking about customer experience, typically you need to convince everybody in the company that this makes sense. No, you need a business case. Because why should we start doing things differently? And My favorite example is always, we're in Mechelen, not far from Antwerp. Antwerp is one of the main coffee transportation hubs. And people tell me, typically, oh, but in our market, everything is about the price. Is it now? Let's look at the example of coffee beans. Coffee is the ultimate commodity. Anybody could theoretically drive to the Antwerp harbor, go there, get a bag of 50 kilos, or 60 kilos coffee is, take it on their back, and go home. Nobody does that. But if I wanted to do that, the cost per cup of coffee, 10 beans, would be roughly 1 cent. And still nobody does it. That's the cheapest way of getting my coffee. So I might go into the supermarket and buy it in a half-pound pack or a half-kilo pack. The same cup of coffee costs roughly 8 cents. If I go to Nespresso and get those little aluminium cups, 40 cents. Still the same 10 beans of coffee. If I get it from a machine somewhere, a cheap machine at work, €1, same bad coffee from a plastic cup in a machine. In the theme park, $2.50 or more. If I go to Starbucks, nothing less than $3.50. Or if I go to a deluxe restaurant, that same cup of Nespresso now suddenly will be sold to me at €5. It's the same 10 beans, and depending on the experience that's around it, the price changes. And then finally, some years ago, I proposed to my wife in Venice, and well, wife, so yes, she said yes. And afterwards, we went to the Piazza San Marco and ordered 2 espressos. Does anybody have any idea what those 2 espressos cost? You know what? I have no idea. Because it was completely irrelevant. They could have cost €100 and I would have paid it smiling. Because the experience was the love of my life just agreed to marry me. And this, to me, if I have to summarize my whole practice of customer centricity, this is it. This is the one slide that tells the whole story. Delivering the right experience for what that customer needs at that moment determines the price that he's willing to pay. That's our business case. And now the next step is, of course, we want to create customers that are happy, that are so happy that they're theoretically willing to recommend us. So if they're so happy, they'll spend more with us. They'll buy more expensive products, negotiate less hard, stay loyal, stay longer, might upsell easier to them. They're easier to service. If something goes wrong, and this is a happy customer, they will say, hey guys, can you solve this problem for me? Instead of an unhappy customer who will start yelling at your service staff. Which also means that happy customers lead to happy employees. And they generate new business. And one thing that I'm bringing onto my presentations at the moment, this is what happened during the financial crisis, now 12 years ago. Those companies that focused on providing a great experience came flying out of the crisis. Those who cut their customer service, who cut their customer experience, had a big trouble over time to regain their old standing. So particularly in types of crisis, focus on keeping your existing customers happy. So I'm sure you all sit here because you already believe in the fact that customers are, that a good customer experience is important. So how do we go about it? How do we make sure that we actually deliver a great experience? And a lot of companies actually roll the dice, as in they gamble. Say, yeah, we got good people and we got a good product, it'll be fine. The problem is that often it is not fine. And often it only takes one bad experience for a customer to choose somebody else. So what we say is, let's start with your promise, with your value proposition. And in German, they say it very beautifully, das Wertversprechen. It's a promise. It's not just a proposition, it's a promise. I promise to you, customer, that I will always deliver the following. And if you know that, and if you have defined that for yourself, you can then start looking at, so how do I deliver that promise consistently? And here, this is an example. Last year, we worked with Heineken, the B2B. I know the Belgians in the room think that it's not beer. Frankly, most Dutch think the same, I can tell you. Even the Heineken people themselves say, we make beer for people that don't really like beer. But okay, it's one of the most successful companies in the world with that. But this was the B2B side, the HoReCa side. So their customers are pub owners, hotel owners, restaurant owners. And we dug deep, we talked to a lot of those owners, we talked to the people in the company, say, why do people love you? Because they have they're extremely successful, they're growing, their customers are loyal. Why? And the funny thing was that the customers and the people in the company said the same thing. We help our customers be successful. They use different words, the beautiful exercise with writing all kinds of stuff down on whiteboards and whatever, but it all came down to the same thing. We succeed by making our customers successful. Now, if you know that that is the promise you make, everything else flows from that. Any action you take, you can measure against, are we helping our customers to succeed? Hey, we're bringing in a new billing system. Do we help our customers to be more successful? Well, actually, we're making life harder for them. Then don't do it, because it doesn't support your promise. So step one, if you want to deliver a great experience, figure out what is your promise. What is your value promise? And the next step is, of course, hey, we have a promise. How do we actually make sure that everybody in the company delivers against that? Then we get to customer journey. I'm sure you have heard of it. I'm sure many of you have already mapped your customer journeys. But in many companies, it's still, and this is, for instance, a car company. I work with a lot of car companies. And typically, they say, the journey, that's pre-sales, when we bombard them with advertising, then they buy a car, and then afterwards they come to service. Now think of your own experience as a car buyer. Is that your life? No, your life looks much more complex. You start thinking about, in 3 years, I might go for my next car, or in 3 months, but you start searching. You start looking at, that's a dream car, but I can't afford that. Or maybe I can if I do a special leasing deal. You do a test drive, you select it. There's a lot of steps in there, and each of these steps, again and again, can lead to a breakdown of the relationship. The test drive, we worked with Lexus at some point, premium car manufacturer. We did market research, and what came back that people said, I did a test drive with a 120,000 euro car, and when I came back, I had to pay €3.41 for the petrol that was used during the test drive. I'm out of there. That's the kind of things, if you don't manage all the steps in the journey, if you don't know what the steps in the journey are, you can't manage them, and if you don't manage them, you get breakdowns. And for instance, example here, you see there in the middle, wait. I've ordered my car, it has not been delivered yet. It's a waiting period. Most car companies don't manage that, while emotionally, it's probably the most important one. You just signed for, whatever it is, 12,000. Huge amount of money if you're a young first car buyer. Maybe 100,000, anywhere in between there. You signed away a big check, and you go home and said, will that car actually will my kids actually like the car when it comes, etc. So manage that period, and you create a lot of positive. If you don't manage it, you run the risk of somebody actually going into a negative spiral. So it's absolutely essential to understand what are those steps. And at the end, we want to create that complete overview of the steps, and along those steps, understand what actually goes on with the client, with the customer. What are their rational experiences, expectations at each step? But also, what are their emotional expectations or their fears for each step? What is the transaction that we want to take place? And, we have a promise. At every one of those steps, What happens? How do they connect with us? What do we want them to experience? And of course, what do we want to achieve as a company? Do we want to sell? Do we want to upsell? Do we want to service? What is it that we're trying to achieve? And got a nice little example here, the Vodafone global journey map, where we mapped exactly what is it that they want, how important is it to them. At the top, you see the emotional mapping. Here, I just bought a subscription with a new phone, and I'm waiting for that new phone to be delivered. That's a high emotion point. Here, I just use my phone. Companies think, yeah, but that's where it goes wrong with the billing, etc. So that's where we need to focus everything. Well, obviously, your billing needs to work, but the customer doesn't want to hear from you. He just wants his phone to work. So again, understand what is important so you can focus your limited resources on those moments that are of most importance for the customer, where you have the highest potential to create a wow moment or the highest potential to really annoy them if you do something wrong. As I said, this is a masterclass. We don't have that much time. So in the handout that everybody can get, I don't actually know how exactly, download afterwards or by email, I put a couple of worksheets you can use to create your own customer journey. You know, what are the steps? And for each of the steps, think through what's going on in the mind of the customer. What do they want from me? And how can I make a difference? How can I make them happy at this stage? What are the must-dos? The phone company, well, the phone absolutely needs to work. The phone not working, I lost my customer. The phone working doesn't make anybody go, wow. It just goes, well, duh. So what's the next step? How can I create a story that allows the customer to go, now that was special. Now I have a story to tell. Now I can recommend you. So look at those worksheets if you're interested and start building your own customer journey. So that's the start. Okay, wonderful. We have a journey. We have established what we want to deliver. Now we need to get everybody on board. We need that information that I just talked about. We need to convince people that this works, and we need to tell them how they can contribute. So we have a little framework. We wouldn't be consultants if it weren't 3 C's. Core system, create value, capture value. Oh, it's actually 4 C's. There's something missing. Communicate value. I'll just go through it very quickly. Again, for each of them, we have a little bit of some worksheets that can help you. So at the core, we need to talk to customers to figure out what's important to them. Now, if you're a small company, I wanted to skip this, but okay, now it's on the screen. If you're a small company, you know your individual customers. You maybe have 20, 30, 40, 50 customers. Talk to them individually. Call them up individually or have a friend or one of the colleagues do it. Talk to everyone. Now, I do this for our company, for FutureLab, and we're part of a larger group, Infinite, but we still only have about 30 customers, but they're the Deutsche Telekoms and Telefonicas, etc. of the world. I just call them up. Say, so, how do you feel at the moment? Would you recommend us as a service provider? And the answers you get out of that are unbelievably insightful, because they tell you, look, generally you're doing okay, but would I recommend you? Not right now, because that project management approach you're taking there, it's really not working, and I'm getting complaints from my colleagues. Okay, thank you. I can do something about that. So let's start by thinking, so who should I ask? And if you're a technology provider, for instance, make sure that you talk to multiple people in the organization, not just the users, but also the buyer, and maybe the CEO, to get a complete picture of what's going on. Think about, how do I ask them? Now, as a small company, I have some very simple tricks for you. If you're bigger, okay, maybe get a platform that helps you to do that. And of course, what questions should we ask? We love Net Promoter, and all of you know that Net Promoter question. You get it in your emails. It's the, would you recommend us? It's a great question, not the question itself, but we ask it with open questions. We say, why did you give the score that we asked for? And that's where the real value is, because people tell us why they would recommend or not. And in those interviews, I ask that simple question. Would you recommend us? 8, 9, 10, great. Sometimes a 0. Very rarely, but it happens. Why? Tell me why. What can we do better? And out of that, you get an understanding. Who are the people that are really annoyed with you? The detractors. They're about to leave, so do something. That's one of the biggest things here. You catch your unhappy customers before they leave you. There's the passives who say, oh, everything's fine. And there's the promoters, those that say, hell yeah, I love you. I would recommend you. Well, great that we know that. Now let's make sure they actually do. So we do this because it's a very short questionnaire, 1 minute of their time, and we get decent response rates. I mean, because nowadays almost everybody uses these customer surveys. People get a little bit tired of them, but it's still the best way to get that feedback. And if you want to do it yourself, and if you're small and you don't have much budget, it's perfect to do it yourself. If you're small, just send out emails with these questions or do phone interviews and record the answers in Excel. Or use Google Forms. For free, you can do pretty good stuff there. Or you have SurveyMonkey, SurveyLegend, and a couple more of these that have a free starter pack or a very cheap way of doing it. And if you're in e-commerce, have a look at Zenloop, if your e-commerce platform doesn't have it built in. But this, for me, is the start of everything. Start talking to the customers. And you can then send the invitations. It looks very simple, and it should be. Don't fall for the trap, and I see too many people do that. Oh, when we're asking them, let's ask them everything. 40 questions. Airlines still do that. Having an RFP from Lufthansa right now about their voice of the customer. Please stop doing that, because people hate 40 questionnaires. 3 questions, that's all. And if you do an interview, I gave an example of how an interview could look if you just call somebody, say 15 minutes of your time. Actually, most people are very happy to participate. They like it more than a survey, but of course you have to do time, have the time. And the key thing is always talk to your customers, ask them. I have an example, one of the car companies, German car company, where people called with complaints in the contact center. And I suggested, how about we ask them whether they want it done thoroughly or quickly. Now, can you imagine how a group of German engineers reacts if you say that? No, everybody needs to be fast and thorough. But it's impossible. You cannot do that. You don't have the budget, you don't have the people. So ask them. And turns out 50% of the people said, you know what, just send me a €50 coupon for a rubber mat and I'm good. In 2 minutes, the thing is done. The other half says, yeah, I want it thoroughly and I want to know who's guilty and I want to see personal consequences. These are people with a real serious complaint. But they say, fine if it takes 3 weeks. You sort this out. So talk to the customer how they want to be treated. And by the way, kind of one of my big topics, talk to your employees. Talk on a daily basis to your service employees. They know what's bugging the customer. They know where it hurts. They can give you all the great input. Now, once you know what is important for the customers, you need to do something with that. Create value. There's one simple approach we call close the loop, which very simply means everybody who's giving you feedback, go back to them. Tell them what you did with their feedback. Every single one. It's the biggest mistake the big companies make. They send out these NPS surveys and they don't do anything with it. And that really pisses off your customer. I just told you that something went wrong and I never hear again. So why did I waste my time giving you feedback? And this helps us to get a very direct contact with the customer. And ideally, if you're the manager, you do it. You call them back and hear from them what went wrong, why are they upset, how can we solve this together, or let the rest of the organization do it. It's also for them a great way to hear the voice of the customer directly. So if you survey, if you get feedback from customers, make sure you act upon it. You call them back and you tell them what you did with it. And we have one of my favorite cases is Weber, the barbecues. We started in Germany. In the end, we did it all over Europe. We did a survey, would you recommend Weber? And people said, would I recommend? I did. I sold 3 of those barbecues for you. Why? Because the meat tastes so much better. Now, between you and me, does it? I don't know. But if that's what customers think, that's for us unbelievably useful marketing input. You know, they had the likes of the TV chef in most countries in 30-second TV spots. Stop that. That's not why customers buy. Customers buy because of experience. So let's make sure that more people can taste that meat and get that experience. And then we looked at the comments further, at the second column, what can we do better? Everybody said, lower the prices. And when I said that sentence first, the CFO said, give me my 100 euros to the CEO, because they had a bet. The CFO and the head of sales said, we're too expensive. I said, what we see, and you may not speak German, but you see smileys here. These were people who said, I give you a 10. I love you. You're the greatest thing in the world. What can we do better? Well, actually nothing, but cheaper is always better. So even if people tell you, drop your prices, do they really mean that? Or are they saying, actually, everything is fine. I can't think of anything else than a lower price. So for Weber, by changing based on that feedback, change the marketing entirely to being experiential while keeping the same price. We doubled the sales in 3 years with the CEO of Germany. By now, I think he's global CEO now. So it can be very good for your career. And in B2B, it can be as simple as, hey, you gave me a 10? Wonderful, please buy more. Sonepar, one of our customers, they literally do that. I see you gave a 10, but your share of wallet with us is less than half. Let's push it up. We did that, we ran the test in half of Germany and 50 million extra revenue just from this. Which brings us to the real business case. And I have a very simple approach. We developed that together with Lexus dealers, which were very skeptical about, my family has been selling cars here for 100 years. Who are you to tell me how to do it differently? Who would I be? But let's talk it through. Let's talk through how happy customers can help us make more money. And ever since, we've used this sheet, and again, you get it in the handout. We've used this sheet in at least 50 companies. And we tell people, sit down for 15 minutes with your colleagues over a coffee or a beer and talk this through. And people say, yeah, but I don't know those numbers. That you do. If you're not the owner, if you're not the boss, if you're just in the organization, you know those numbers in your gut feeling. Because the very simple principle here is how many cars, widgets, printers, software packages, whatever, do people buy over their lifetime when they're very happy or when they're unhappy? How much extra value do we generate? We get a first number out of that. So in the case of Lexus, for instance, one unhappy customer, I asked them, how many cars does an unhappy customer buy? 1. How many cars does a super happy customer buy? 4. Now, if it's Opel, it might be 6, but typically, those are kind of the numbers. And we make a nice margin. We make a margin on the car. We make a margin on service visits. So an unhappy customer who has left us still made 1,200 euros for us. That's not too bad, right? And a really happy customer made 5,000 euros for us. That's really good. But the next line is the word of mouth effect. How many others did they convince based on their own happy or unhappiness? How many customers did that unhappy customer stop from buying a Lexus? Anybody, any idea? And the same question is, how many extra customers did that super happy customer bring? We did the research. It's roughly 1 per car that you own. So that detractor, the unhappy buyer, stopped 1 other from buying it. The happy one brought 4 more. When we now look at that, and let's say for the sake of ease, that we take an average value for such a customer. And suddenly we see that the detractor, he gave us 1,200 himself, but he stopped 2,500 in margin from us, and suddenly he's a loss maker. This was the biggest eye-opener for the Lexus dealers and in any other company. Wait a minute, unhappy customers are not just bringing less revenue, they actually cost us money. Well, here we have a beautiful multiplier. 4 new customers at 2.5. Now suddenly this is 15,000. And we have a difference in 16,000 in profit generated per customer. Now we've done this for Vodafone in an Eastern European country, random numbers, 2,500 euros difference between a customer. I've done it for one of the big German brands at the factory level. Can I share? Yeah, I can share. Mercedes S-Class. 360,000 euro difference between those 2 numbers. So I've got an unhappy customer, maybe I should give him a call, becomes a very, very winning business case. So yeah, I put a couple of those things in the handout so you can work with it. At the end of the day, in the B2B, we're typically looking at much higher revenue per customer, per happy customer, and we can start thinking about, so what if we take all those unhappy customers and start turning them into happy ones? And finally, once we've established a business case, you on your own cannot turn the whole company around. You cannot create everybody or turn everybody into customer experience specialists. So you need to convince the rest. And that business case I just shown is an absolutely important starting point. You need to show to people, basically you need to convince them in their hearts, which is usually fairly easy, but you also need to convince them in their heads that, look, this is not just a hobby. We're doing this because we'll make more money with it. And once you start convincing your people, individuals, there's always a couple of people who say, oh, I love this, I want to be part of this. And you support them and help them create great stories about customers, and then more and more people will start participating. And at the end of the day, what it's really about, and I think you can imagine that this slide alone is good for at least a 2-hour masterclass, but start thinking with, are they willing? Who is willing to be more customer-centric? And if they're not, you may have half your staff who says, actually, frankly, I don't care, I just want to do my 9 to 5. Your choice. No, every organization needs those who just want to do 9 to 5, but for instance, Bridgestone, with whom we worked, they said over a period of 4 years, they replaced all of them. They only wanted people who, in their heads and their hearts, were enthusiasts about delivering a great customer experience and create happy customers. Now, having them willing is only the first part. Obviously, they need to be skilled. The biggest part is, based on that feedback you got from the customers, you need to tell the people, here's what you can do. Oh, I just work in IT, I don't see customers. Okay? I mentioned earlier, problems with the billing system. Who makes the layout for the invoices? In Vodafone, in most countries, even most of the telcos, at some point had invoices with 3 numbers behind the comma. Completely pointless, and everybody was confused, but it was something that the IT department had declared. By the way, I know I need 1 more minute. So you need to tell people what's your role, and you need to, of course, make sure they have the right tools and the right training, etc. And then, whoops, my own thing has a laser beamer, so I constantly try to point things out. Able. If I showed you at the beginning the one slide that summarizes the whole reasons why we're doing this. If I want to use one word, why you will never need me as a consultant, enablement. Give your frontline or all your people all the power in the world to do for the customer what they know is right. The most successful companies in the world are those who say, you know it much better than we do, and some of you may have heard of the example of the Ritz-Carlton, who empowers everybody in the front line to give up to 2,000 euros worth or dollars worth of freebies, if that makes a customer happy. Swisscom have just introduced it. Up to 1,000 Swiss francs. Any agent, without any further approval, can give up to 1,000 Swiss francs away. And the thing is, they don't abuse it, but they use it in a fantastic way to create happy customers, and we've just seen that that's the kind of customer who goes out and says, wow, now, what happened to me today, you won't believe it, and will bring new customers that way. Because pretty much every customer in the end wants to act on the customer's voice. Once they see what impact they can have on customers, they're very happy to participate. So we have a little system. You may think, ooh, that's for big companies. No, the principles here are relevant for everybody, even if you're well, maybe not if you're a one-man band, because then you don't have to convince your colleagues, but everything else is relevant for everybody. My biggest pain today, only having half an hour, because you see I speak with passion and I would love to share much more with you. One thing you can look at, futurelab.net/inspiration. There's a lot of webinars and trainings I've given where you can pick up a lot more of these things. Thank you.